Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Champions Adjust Sports Talk Show. My name is Aaron Mashbitz. We are discussing a very real and important topic today that really isn't just about sports, but it's really about the fragility of life, the preciousness of life, and the battles every single human being faces every single day. So, with that said, let's talk about Marshawn Kneeland, right? Just days after celebrating his first career NFL touchdown, the Dallas Cowboys defensive end, Marshawn Kneeland, a young man with a very boundless future, was found deceased at the age of 24 in an apparent suicide. It's an absolutely heartbreaking tragedy that again forces us, not even just as a sports community, but as a community at large, to pause, to look beyond football and confront a crisis, an actual crisis that is right in front of us, that is all too real in a world of professional sports and with men in general. The silent, very silent, unseen battle of mental health. So, a few facts about Marshawn and the situation at hand. Marshawn was a second-year player, a former second-round draft pick out of Western Michigan. Teammates described Marshawn as beloved, a hardworking player. They say his energy and his smile was infectious. Reports have confirmed that in the hours leading up to his death, Marshawn had been involved in police pursuit in Frisco, Texas, following a traffic violation and subsequent crash. Authorities were later alerted by his girlfriend, an agent, that he sent goodbye messages and expressed suicidal ideations. Tragically, he was found deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound shortly thereafter. Now, of course, obviously, my thoughts and prayers are with all that loved Marshawn. As someone who has experienced losing someone they love to suicide, I lost my sister, Rachel, to suicide back in 2018. I know exactly how they feel. It's the absolute worst pain you will ever experience in your whole life being a suicide loss survivor. The guilt, the shame is overwhelming, and the grieving journey is very complicated. So again, all my thoughts and prayers are with all that loved and knew Marshawn. And so some people might look at a guy like Marshawn and see that he had it all. Well, mental health does not discriminate. No matter your job title, your money, your race, your creed, your ethnicity, no matter what, mental health does not discriminate. And others might look at this situation and also feel like, oh, that suicide is so selfish. That's a myth that's been perpetuated for a very long time. So let me expand and explain that. Of course, it's very logical to understand why someone would reach that conclusion that suicide is selfish, especially potentially maybe looking at a guy like Marshawn, who had it all, who was in the NFL, who was making money and all these types of things and had fame and access and all these cool things that some people think they want. So why would he end his own life? That's so selfish. What about all the people that loved him? What about all the people that cared for him? Well, when you get to that point, when you get to that deep, dark point where you're in the depths of your own hell and you're thinking about ending and taking your own life, and you're having those suicidal thoughts and those suicidal ideations, and you're really considering doing it, you're not thinking about anything outside of what's happening in your brain. And most of the time, now, all suicides are different and unique and complex, but some general themes throughout is that usually for adults, and for men, they don't want to necessarily die, but they definitely want the pain to end. And they see like this is their only actual choice they have left. And so it's not selfish because, yes, he scored a touchdown 2 days earlier. Yes, he was with his girlfriend and he had a loving family and friends and teammates that cared for him and all that. He is not thinking about any of those things. He is saying, God damn, I'm in so much pain right now that I have to find a way for this to end. There's too much pressure. There's too much this. I'm a burden. I'm not enough. I haven't done everything I could. I've let people down. All of these thoughts starts to rumble throughout your brain in a sort of consistent, persistent manner, and you just can't handle it anymore. And you don't really want to die. You just say, I need this pain to end. And again, that ultimate permanent choice of suicide is what you feel like the only choice is that you have left. And so we should not continue to use this suicide is selfish myth because it's wrong. And now, if you use this myth, I totally understand why. It's logical, and God bless you. You've probably never experienced this type of pain, or you've never been around someone who's experienced this type of psychological pain, this psych ache. And so it makes sense, but we have to continue talking about these types of things, bringing them into the light, educating ourselves more, because every single one of us plays a role in preventing suicide. So I just wanted to expand on that myth about suicide and potentially what you might feel about hearing about Marshawn. And again, the whole suicide is selfish myth also creates a very low resolution picture of the human. I know Marshawn and the people who loved him do not want that. I know I don't want my sister being considered selfish. That's a horrible and disrespectful view of her. She was a fighter. She battled. She did many great things in her life. Again, like Marshawn, she had an infectious smile. She was beloved. And so those things are really, really important to understand when we're just throwing out these types of phrases and when we're talking about this very complicated, nuanced, and serious topic of suicide, whether it's in sports, out of sports, it doesn't matter. Again, mental health does not discriminate. Again, this is a devastating reminder that mental health struggles do not discriminate based on talent, fame, success, nothing. Nothing. Think about the world that elite athletes inhabit, right? One, it's immense pressure. Every snap, every tackle, every mistake is scrutinized on a national stage. Their self-worth can become tragically tied to their performance. That's why we have to untether our identity to our sport, right? Our value is much more outside of that. Our value is our characteristics. Our value is our identity, who we're being on a repeated basis. But there's so much pressure that comes with elite sport or just being a human in this world that yes, it can become too much, right? The next thing is like identity loss, which I just mentioned. But what happens when an injury hits or their career ends? Who are they when they take off the uniform? Like that is the hardest part. One of the hardest parts about being an athlete. You chase this dream since you're 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and then all of a sudden, boom, it comes to an end and you're 25, 26, 27, 30, 31, 35 years old. And you don't know who you are outside of that. And so that becomes really important for our emotional and mental health. And then I think in professional sports and maybe just with men in general, we sort of have this tough guy culture. The sports world is steeped in this culture of, play hurt, shake it off, don't show weakness. This can be a tough environment and a hard environment, one, to ask for help, and two, to build solid emotional help. Now, there is a place for all of this. I think with men in general, it's about being the warrior poet. And a warrior is someone who can defend, protect, and be hard and be tough when he needs to be. But a poet is someone who can express love and show beauty and ask for help. And I think the strongest men among us are those warrior poets. And so inside of a sports culture, we should be able to ask for help because what makes great teams is great relationships. Great relationships create great cultures, and great cultures create winning championships. Ultimately, sports are about winning championships, but you have to simplify it all the way down to what's most important. My players, my personnel, the community, the relationships we have are most important. So that dynamic needs to change, or else we're going to keep having these very tragic incidents happen over and over and over again, as we've seen in professional sports and again with men in general. And then you have this idea of isolation, right? What about moving to a new city, leaving your family, leaving your core group, doing a lot of lonely work, sacrificing many things, living under a microscope can lead to a profound isolation. So there are many, many factors, again, immense pressure, identity loss, tough guy culture, isolation that can lead to very, very poor emotional and mental health. And this is what elite performance actually looks like on all different levels. But here we're just talking about professional football, right? And we also had the Dallas Cowboys' own Dak Prescott not recently, but sometime bravely shared his own struggles with anxiety and depression following the suicide of his brother Jace, right? His willingness to be vulnerable even as the face of America's team, is how the conversation moves forward. Also, Solomon Thomas is moving the conversation forward as well. And so those things become really, really important. And so obviously mental health care cannot be a crisis response, right? Most teams now have a sports psychologist that needs to be intertwined with a clinical mental health psychologist, and those things need to be together working with players, integrated into the facility, all part of trying to make these players the best they can possibly be emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, all these types of things. It cannot be a crisis response. It cannot be. It must be daily maintenance. Teams must, absolutely must at this point, integrate depth trained therapists as a fundamental part of the team's infrastructure, as essential as a strength coach, a PT, a trainer, all these things working hand in hand with the sports psychologist to make sure these players are as healthy as they can possibly be. There's enough money in professional sports to make this happen. It has to be a top priority, right? And then, of course, like from professional sports, a branch off of that, on top of the athlete mental health, our young men are struggling, whether they're in sports or not, just in general, our young men are struggling and they need our help. Listen to this. Men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide. If that doesn't make you just stop and pause and say we need to have more empathy for young men, then you need to reconsider your values. 4 times more likely to die by suicide. Men need our help. The whole culture of mental health needs a reform. It needs proactive prevention. That's what we have to start talking about. And so I will wrap this up with this. All suicides are extremely tragic, very tragic, and very, very painful for everyone involved and unique in their own way. But the only hope we have to reduce suicide rates, again, of course, is policy change and mental health reform and things of that nature. But on our level, is to openly talk about and become a society that is proactive, not reactive, with our mental health, becoming proactive rather than reactive. We do that in sports with a lot of different things. Why not do that in the whole culture to reduce and hopefully eventually prevent suicides from ever happening? And so once again, my heart absolutely goes out to everyone that knew or loved Marshawn. So with that said, please remember how precious and fragile life is. Please value what you have while you have it, and tell the people in your life that you love them as often as possible, because the last time could be the last time. Thank you for your time and attention. Much love.